I realise now that things that are quite, I guess, dramatic involving animals do sometimes get traction, but I wasn't necessarily expecting as much. Yeah, engagement and views, etc. So yeah, first of all, like, thank you for the nice comments and the, curious questions and the engagement, because my intention with the video was basically to share something that's quite rare, because it's something that I've been struggling to get diagnosed for many years. And if I wasn't seeing videos like that of representing a seizure in a horse when I was researching it years ago, trying to work out what on earth was going on. So I thought if stuff like that was actually out there for people with horses that were kind of searching, looking for examples that they could maybe show their vet, or they could kind of realize that there was other horses that were doing something similar to maybe their horse was, so they could get treatment. And I appreciate it's gone much wider than just horse people as well. So and it's probably relevant for people that are generally researching maybe about seizures and looking up seizures in other animals as well, perhaps. So a couple of things. I think most people want to know, like, what actually happened, and was the horse okay afterwards. So the first thing I'll say is, she was okay. These are seizures that happen, realistically. It feels like it's going on forever, but realistically it's only like probably a minute or so that you're seeing those sort of symptoms of the seizure, and then afterwards she's very quiet, and then she starts grazing again. And if it's something that I've seen, I can kind of give her pain relief and check she's okay. So first of all, she was okay. The video was actually taken I think it was 2020 when I looked on my phone to check when it was actually from. So it's a couple of years old now. The horse is well, she first of all, she's I kind of posted it fairly, like, without too much detail, but it's my horse I've had for many years. So I've had her from, I probably said this actually in the caption, but from when I've known her since she was like 7, owned her from 10 years old all the way up to 27. She did pass away a couple of years ago, for different reasons. It was relating to arthritis and sort of worsening issues with lameness, so not to do directly with the seizures. So she was managing with the seizures. And she's very much loved horse, like my horse. Did everything possibly could to make her life comfortable, and got treatment and sort of advocated for her when we were being told to sort of have her put down because of the seizures early on, when they weren't affecting her, so that she was kind of falling over like you saw in the video. So the backstory, I guess, was that they started when, well, I don't know for sure when they started, because obviously I don't know that they weren't happening potentially before I saw. But as I said, I had her since she was 10, but knew her from when she was 7, and the seizure started when she was about 12 years old. Initially quite dramatic, because she what's different from maybe other seizures you sometimes see of horses on the internet, because it's very rare. It's not often that you necessarily will see it in person. She's got this desire to kind of run forward and run out of it, which was the dramatic thing that we were seeing. She'd kind of lock up through her head and neck and then sort of run, basically, but in a sort of seized up way. It was difficult back then, because this was a few years ago. There wasn't like very good camera phones. I don't think there was camera phones, but they weren't very good till quite recently, really. So I didn't have footage. I was just explaining to vets like what had happened, and initially they thought maybe a brain tumor, just based on what was discussed, and it was best to put her to sleep, which I wasn't comfortable with. And I think if it was a brain tumor, she would have got worse very quickly, I would assume, because it didn't progress like that. And I was very, emotional about it, but very determined to kind of discover what was actually going on. And so very much like carried on with, diagnostic testing and saying, no, I don't want that to happen. I want to do the best for her and work out what's going on. But yeah, this time she wasn't falling over. She was kind of running in circles, getting out of it, and then, carrying on much as normal. She did get diagnosed then as having EPSM, which is equine polysaccharide storage myopathy, which is to do with, I'm not going to go into the scientific side of it, but it's basically to do with storing, I think, starches and sugars in the way they get metabolized in the muscles, and it can cause cramps and issues. And it's something that she's in what's like in the UK classed as an Irish Draught cross. I don't know exactly. I think it's a part-bred thoroughbred, so that's why she's a bit lighter than a an Irish Draught. A bit lighter, kind of like what we'd class as we'd call a sports horse, which is basically a sort of a cross between a slightly heavier thing like a Draught with a lighter thing like a thoroughbred, in sort of simple terms. So it's something that is associated with Draught type breeds. And that meant, she had a muscle biopsy, and that meant that basically it's kind of a management thing. They don't recover from it as such. It's just something you need to manage with, diet and exercise, and managing, how much starch and sugar they're getting. That tends to cause them to kind of lock up and not really move very well. So it wasn't specifically what I was seeing with the seizures where she was like running forwards. But at the time, that's what, the specialist vets that we took her to sort of said was going on. And that was their theory of what was causing these sort of episodes. So yeah, for a number of years we carried on with that. I think there was also something in the blood, the muscle biopsy, which was possibly something to do with some sort of infection or something that you can get from deer. There was some sort of like markers of like a parasite thing, but I think in the end that was like discounted as not being relevant. It was just something that was showing up. I can't remember what it was called now, but anyway, it was discounted as not being significant at the time. So meanwhile, she was 12 years old, fit and well. And, so my horse, I had at that point in time, had two horses, another little thoroughbred and her. And basically, we sort of carried on managing that condition. She had a few other issues to do with lameness as well, in terms of like I think it was suspensory at that time. So, she was being treated for other things. But otherwise, the seizures were kind of not a problem at that point. A couple, I can't remember the exact timeline because it was effectively she'd been going with the seizures for about 15 years, all in all. What happened next was she was getting some episodes of the seizures were happening just, occasionally. I did sort of link it to when she was in season and think that perhaps it was something to do with being in season. And again, mentioned it to, to vets. But we didn't have good footage basically because there wasn't there just wasn't the ability to, that was really random when they would have happened. So just, when I was just doing like usual chores or watching in the field or anything like that, it wouldn't always be that I would necessarily see what was going on, or be able to record it properly. So I was just going on what I could relay to people and like searching the internet. But again, there was nothing really that was indicative of this sort of thing where, they're sort of running and circling, and, quite a, dramatic thing like we saw in the video. I did find out about the hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, I think it's called, that it was more associated with an American bloodline, and it did look a bit like that if you look up that sort of episode. Although, as far as I understood, that wasn't something that would affect a horse in the UK that didn't have those. It was very specific bloodlines to do with the stallion impression. Yeah, so that wasn't something that was a possibility as far as I knew. And yeah, but it is the closest thing that I could see to it. So yeah, more time went on basically, and we managed it. I did carry on riding her because she'd never had a seizure whilst I was riding. Fortunately, she was retired through to having sort of injuries with her legs, and just onset of arthritis, which was fine because she was going to be my horse forever. So that was, and she was, so that wasn't an issue. Fortunately, yeah, because obviously I recognise now being seizures, it is considered to be quite dangerous, but fortunately, yeah, for the last phase of her life, I was able to buy land and it was mine to manage and make safe for her, so I could kind of make sure that things like the electric fence wasn't on. We had good fencing, good setup, good stables for her, and got a number of other horses now, so she's always had company, and they've always, when I've seen anything like this happen, they've always given her space, stayed really calm around her, and then checked up on her afterwards. So it's not really been an issue in that sense. But what started to happen was a bit like that video. She'd started to fall. So when this was happening, yeah, she was struggling with her balance and falling, which was when it wasn't as simple then as her just running in circles and kind of coming out of it. And that's when I was able to get much better footage because we had the really good iPhones now. And I was fortunate to get that footage because the reason you need the footage is because it happens. You don't know when it's going to happen. It happens for maybe a maximum sort of 60 seconds or something. If you don't capture the footage, you can't really explain to a vet exactly what's happened and them be able to kind of witness it themselves and point you to a diagnosis. So that's why you record. Whilst it's happening, they're not in control of their legs or anything, or their movement. So it's quite dangerous because a horse is obviously very, very large. I think it's the same with people. I think you're not supposed to kind of try and hold them down or do anything to them. You're just trying to keep them in a safe area and let it kind of run its course. Same with dogs as well, I understand. So yeah, what that looked like then was I, got some footage, showed it to my local vet, and obviously that was quite unusual. So they referred it to a sort of professor who specialised in internal medicine, and yeah, with the video footage and the history, they were able to kind of diagnose as epilepsy, which I was slightly surprised about because it had been sort of discounted early on. But that's that's kind of where we'd got to with it. So at this point, the good news then was that through using barbiturate drugs, which is the treatment for epilepsy that they use in dogs, EpiPen tablets, they don't produce one for horses because it's not something that is, I guess, normal, or it's not occurring enough for it to be a drug that's kind of licensed just for horses. So it was a dog drug, many tablets that I needed to give her, and basically for the rest of her life she was on these tablets, which I'm around a lot because I kind of work remotely and after COVID and all of that sort of thing. So I saw her most of the time, and I didn't see her have another seizure once she was on those tablets. And we played around with the dose. I think it was doing blood tests and various things to work out the dosage. But yeah, she basically stayed on those for the rest of her life and didn't have another seizure. But even though I was seeing them a bit more frequently then, she didn't have any more seizures. So that was really, really good. So I suppose the upshot of that is, it's still quite an unknown thing in horses. I don't necessarily know what causes it, if it's a genetic thing, if it's Probably much like, research into seizures in people and other animals. We don't know exactly what's going on. But yeah, I'm happy to say, she was. I know some of the questions, it will be dependent on, where you are in the world. So in the UK, we, horses don't really suffer from tick-borne diseases or anything like that. She was vaccinated against tetanus through her life. So it wasn't tetanus. I know some people were saying, is that a tetanus? No, it probably would have been more fatal if it was. So it wasn't tetanus going on. She's had colic a number of times. Treatment for that. Certainly wasn't colic that was going on there. And yeah. Don't know where I got to, but someone just rang me, so I had to stop for a second. So not it wasn't colic. I know people maybe think it, it looked like pain reactions, but it wasn't colic. Treated colic a number of times for her and looks very different ultimately. And in terms of worming, it's customary now to do kind of worm counts and targeted worming. So she's always been on that sort of program. So so it's not to do with parasites as such, as far as we know. And I know that there could be kind of things that we don't know about in the whole world of seizures, but so none of those things were kind of like she was always very looked after for that. I know some people have commented on like what she got on her, and there's like little dots of white, and that's because just before this happened, she'd been in the field shelter. The field shelter's in that field, and it's like bedded down with shavings. So she was lying down. I remember she got up because I brought her some feed to eat in the shelter, and basically she started having the seizure once she'd got up. So she was covered in shavings basically when she was going around. I think I shared another clip as well, but basically just after, and I can't remember if it was in there. Just after this, the other horses were like behind at the time, so they came to meet her across the field basically after this had happened and she got up, and it was quite dramatic, but then she got her balance back and then just carried on eating really like nothing had happened. And I checked her over, gave her what we call in the UK bute, which is a pain relief that horses have. So she, I was advised to do that, give her some pain relief, because as I'm sure people know who have seizures, I think it's quite painful once if your muscles have been cramping and you've been in that situation. And then she was kind of okay after that. So I think the main thing to say is this wasn't like, the intention wasn't to get traction or to shock people, and I apologize if it is, if it pops up on your YouTube feed, it is quite dramatic and looks quite like, oh my goodness. But the idea was to kind of just to raise awareness, because I had really struggled for years to find any footage, and if it's your lovely horse that you really want to kind of care for and get better and get to the bottom of, then you want to see other people's stories, and that's basically why I've shared it, because I wanted if other people were going through this with their horse, for them to we start to Google and look on YouTube and things to see that somebody else has been through something similar, and you can go, oh yeah, it's like that. Because all the seizure videos I was seeing, as I said, was horses that were like basically not really moving but just kind of twitching a bit, and that just didn't seem like what was happening with my horse Flora. So I thought I'd just do a bit of an update basically, because it's been a little while, and there's been quite a bit of traction on it, and I'm happy to answer more questions and share a bit more about it.